You know, when we look at nature, it's just this explosion of complexity, right? It's almost overwhelming. But what if? What if underneath it all, there's a simple, elegant principle that just runs everything? Kind of like a universal operating system. Well, today, we're going to explore a theory that says, yeah, we found it.
And it all starts with this one kind of mind-blowing question. What if all the dynamic relationships in the entire universe, from the cells inside your body to the galaxy spinning in space, could be described by just two fundamental lines of code?
The key to unlocking this whole thing is a principle called the mass action law. And the unified theory we're diving into today, it's the life's work of one scientist, Dr. Ting-Chao, who spent 5 decades, that's half a century, developing it into this incredibly powerful universal framework. So, what's the first of these two codes? Well, it's the one that defines all of us. It's the blueprint for life itself. Dr. Chao's theory starts by splitting the universe into two very distinct domains. On one side, you have life. It's finite. It operates in a closed system, which means everything has to be recycled. On the other side, you have non-life. That's everything else. And it's infinite, it's open, and it's completely unbounded. So the code for life is what's called the floating ratio. Now that formula, A divided by 1 minus A, isn't just some abstract math. It's the perfect description of a world where nothing is wasted. It's the very logic of sustainability, right? Because in a closed system, the whole always has to equal 1. Everything is accounted for. Okay, so that's the code for the finite, closed-loop systems of biology. But what about everything else? Well, let's jump to the second code and see how this all connects. And the code for non-life is actually one you've probably heard of before, the famous golden ratio. It shows up everywhere in mathematics and physics, and it describes patterns that can just go on forever, expanding into infinity. It is the perfect, beautiful opposite to the self-contained code of life. So now we have these two really elegant but totally separate codes, right? One for finite life, another for infinite non-life. For a long time, it felt like they were two different universes, but this is where the real genius of Dr. Chao's work comes in. He discovered the bridge, the universal reference point that connects absolutely everything. And here it is. He called it the doctrine of the median. The big idea is that for any system, nature has a universal point of balance, a point of harmony and symmetry. And that point is the median, the dose or the input that causes a 50% effect. He called it the dim. This one core insight allowed Dr. Ting-Chao to wrap up this entire principle into a single, incredibly powerful formula, the median effect equation. Okay, let's break this down real quick, because it's actually beautiful. The equation says the ratio of the stuff that's affected over the stuff that's unaffected is directly related to the ratio of the dose you're adding over that universal 50% balance point, the dm. And by focusing on these ratios, the equation becomes dimensionless, and that's the key. It means you can use the exact same formula to analyze a chemical reaction, a drug's effect, or an entire ecosystem. The units don't matter because the underlying principle is always the same. And get this just shows you how powerful that idea is. All those famous equations you learn in biochemistry, Michaelis-Menten, the Hill equation, turns out they aren't separate laws. Dr. Chao showed that they are all just special cases that you can derive directly from his one single unified equation. So this unified theory is obviously profound, but its real power, its almost magical ability, is what it lets us do with messy, real-world data. So this is what science often looks like in the real world. You plot the dose of something against its effect, and you get, well, a mess. You get all these different complex, squiggly curves. They're hard to compare, and it takes a ton of data points just to figure out what's even going on. But just watch what happens when you take that exact same messy data and you plot it using Dr. Chao's method. It's like magic. It takes every single one of those unpredictable curves, and bam, it transforms it into a perfect, simple, straight line. Every single time. And this isn't just about making a clean-looking graph. That straight line is basically a cheat code. The slope of the line, that instantly gives you the m value, which is the shape or character of the system. The spot where it crosses the x-axis, that instantly gives you the dm, its potency. Just two numbers and the entire dose-effect relationship is defined. It's incredible. So let's think about this. If you can turn any complex biological relationship into a simple, predictable straight line, what does that mean for how we actually do science?
Well, the impact is staggering.
I mean, think back to geometry class. To define a straight line, you only really need 2 points. So this brings up a really radical question for scientific research.
And this leads us to Dr. Chao's most revolutionary idea, the minimum two-dose theory. The logic is so simple. Since a line is so predictable, and the algorithm already knows some default points, it means you can figure out the entire system with far, far fewer experimental data points. And how many fewer are we talking about? Well, in some cases, the improvement is just dramatic. We're talking about a 10-fold increase in efficiency. 10 times. And this is not just a theory. This happened. A real-world clinical trial for an anti-HIV drug combination was designed using Dr. Chao's mass action law principles. The result? It needed 10 times fewer patients than a trial designed the old-fashioned way. That saves an unbelievable amount of time, money, and resources. This is a total paradigm shift. The traditional way of doing research is bottom-up. You gather a mountain of data points, and then you hope a pattern emerges. Dr. Chao's approach is top-down. You start with a universal principle that predicts the straight line, and then you just use a few data points to confirm it. You go from describing what happened to predicting what will happen. So all of this builds to this grand, almost philosophical conclusion Dr. Chao calls the unity theory of one. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, we should be looking at the universe through a new lens, a life-centric universe, where the codes that govern life are actually central to understanding everything else: mass, force, time, and space. It's a huge vision, for sure, but it leaves us with this one final, really powerful question to think about. If the fundamental operating system of nature can be boiled down to a single equation that turns all that complexity into a simple, straight line, what other giant, complex problems in our world might have an elegantly simple solution, just hiding in plain sight?